Hello, my friends. Welcome to Daily English Story. Before we start the story today, let me ask you one question. How far would you go for your dream? Would you risk everything, not once, but again and again? This is the story of Jensen Huang. He started as a dishwasher in a Denny's diner. Today he runs NVIDIA, one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. But his success didn't come from playing safe. It came from bold bets, bets that almost destroyed him, bets that everyone said were crazy. So how did a kid who once wiped tables end up building the chips that power artificial intelligence today? Let's find out. Jensen Huang wasn't born in America. He was born in Taiwan in 1963. Life was simple, but his parents dreamed bigger for him. They believed their son could have a future far beyond what Taiwan could offer at the time. So when Jensen was just 9 years old, his parents made a bold decision. They sent him and his brother alone on a plane to the United States. Imagine that. 2 little boys, barely speaking English, landing in a strange country, away from their family. And it wasn't even the America he imagined. Instead of a big city like New York or San Francisco, Jensen found himself in a small town in Kentucky. His relatives enrolled him in a school. But here's the twist. They didn't realize it was a boarding school for troubled kids. Every night, young Jensen shared a dormitory with older boys who had gotten into fights, drugs, or worse. He was scared. He was lonely. He didn't fit in. But instead of breaking him, this experience gave him something powerful: toughness. He learned how to survive in hard places. He learned how to keep moving forward even when things didn't feel fair. Later, Jensen would say, "That school taught me grit." And that grit would become his secret weapon. The thing he relied on when he faced the brutal ups and downs of building NVIDIA. But here's the part that makes you curious. How does a boy from a boarding school in Kentucky go from washing dishes at Denny's to building one of the most important tech companies in the world? That's where the story really begins. As Jensen grew older, he moved with his family to Oregon. And like many immigrant kids, he needed to work. His first real job? Not in an office, not in tech. It was at Denny's, the 24-hour diner. Jensen started at the very bottom, washing dishes, hours of standing in a hot kitchen, scrubbing plates, grease, and pans that never seemed to end. But here's what made him different. Instead of complaining, he treated every job like training. He watched how the kitchen ran, how orders moved, how timing mattered. And he pushed himself to do even better. Soon, the manager noticed and moved him up, from dishwasher to busboy, then to waiter. Now think about that. The future founder of NVIDIA, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, was once serving pancakes and coffee to strangers at 2 a.m. But there's something important here. At Denny's, Jensen learned humility. He learned service. He learned that no matter how smart you are, you have to work hard. And sometimes, you have to start at the very bottom. Later, he would say those Denny's days taught him lessons he carried into business. Move fast, stay humble, and never be afraid of hard work. And yet, deep inside, Jensen had a fire. He knew he wasn't meant to stay at Denny's forever. He loved math, he loved computers, and he dreamed of building something big, something no one had ever built before. But how does a kid flipping pancakes turn that dream into reality? That part of the story comes next. By the early 1990s, Jensen had made it. He wasn't washing dishes anymore. He'd studied electrical engineering, worked at big tech companies like LSI Logic, and had a stable, well-paying job. For most people, that was enough, but not for Jensen. He had this wild thought. Computers should be able to see the world, not just calculate numbers. Back then, computers were great at spreadsheets, at typing documents, but they were terrible at graphics. If you wanted 3D images or fast visuals, the computers of the time would just choke. So here comes the crazy idea. Build a chip that could make computers visual, like a brain for graphics. It sounded ridiculous. Investors laughed. They said, "Why would anyone need that?" Computers are for business, not for games or pictures. But Jensen didn't listen. In 1993, at just 30 years old, he gathered two friends in a Denny's booth. Yes, the same diner where he once washed dishes. And they started sketching the first plan for NVIDIA on a napkin. Think about that. A company worth over $1 trillion today was first dreamed up on a coffee-stained napkin in a diner. But it wasn't all romantic. Starting NVIDIA was a nightmare at first. They had almost no money. The technology they wanted to build didn't exist yet. They had to convince engineers to leave safe jobs and join them on a crazy dream. Jensen even admitted later, "We didn't know if it would work. We just knew it had to. That had to was everything." Because deep down, Jensen believed the future of computers would be visual. And if he was right, the world would change. The question was, could he survive long enough to prove it? Starting NVIDIA was one thing. Keeping it alive was another. In the mid-1990s, the company was small, unknown, and burning through cash. The dream of making a chip for 3D graphics sounded exciting, but turning that dream into actual silicon was brutally hard. Every chip design took millions of dollars, months of work, and if one thing went wrong, it was all wasted. And things did go wrong. NVIDIA's first product, the NV1, came out in 1995. Jensen and his team were so excited. They thought it would change everything. But when it launched, the world just didn't want it. Game developers said it was too complicated. Customers didn't understand it. Sales were terrible. Inside the company, people were nervous. Investors were furious. Some even said, maybe it's time to shut this down. Imagine that. Years of work, all the sleepless nights, and it looked like NVIDIA might not even make it past its first product. But here's the thing about Jensen. He didn't quit. Instead of pretending the NV1 was fine, he admitted the mistake, killed the project, and told his team, "We'll start over." That was a huge risk, because in the chip industry, one wrong move can end you. Competitors like ATI and 3DFX were already ahead, and NVIDIA, they had almost no money left. Jensen made a bold decision, bet everything on one last chance. He pushed his engineers to build a brand new chip, the RFID A128. And this time, they did things differently. They listened carefully to developers. They focused on speed and simplicity. Months later, when the RFID A128 hit the market in 1997, it was a smash. Fast, powerful, and easy to use. Suddenly, people started paying attention. NVIDIA wasn't dead. It was alive. Barely, but alive. Still, Jensen knew the fight was far from over. Big players were circling. Technology kept changing, and NVIDIA's survival depended on moving faster than anyone else. So it pushed harder. The company adopted a brutal rhythm, a new chip every 6 months. No excuses, no delays. That pace nearly killed them. But it also made NVIDIA famous for speed and innovation. Yet even then, Jensen knew one failure could still wipe everything out. The company was alive, yes, but it was living on the edge. The question now: could NVIDIA keep running on the edge without falling off? By 1999, NVIDIA was still the scrappy underdog. They'd survived the failure of their first chip. They'd clawed back some respect with the Riva series, but nobody really believed they could lead the industry. Companies like 3DFX and ATI were bigger, richer, and already inside the hottest games. And then came the project that would decide NVIDIA's fate, the GeForce 256. Now you have to understand, back then, graphics chips were mostly about making games look smoother. Nice colors, better pixels. Fun, sure, but not revolutionary. Jensen saw something more. He believed the graphics card could become the brain of the computer. Not just pretty pictures, but real computing power. So NVIDIA made a radical move. The GeForce 256 wasn't just a graphics card. They called it the world's first GPU, graphics processing unit. It had the power to do math, physics, and 3D calculations directly on the card, not just on the CPU. It was risky. Developers weren't sure if they needed it. Gamers weren't sure if they wanted it. And NVIDIA was betting almost everything on it. But when it launched in late 1999, the reaction was explosive. Suddenly, games weren't just smoother. They felt alive. 3D worlds moved faster, characters looked real, and developers could build things they had only dreamed of before. The GeForce 256 didn't just beat the competition. It buried them. Reviewers called it a revolution. Sales skyrocketed, and for the first time, NVIDIA wasn't just surviving, it was leading. But success created a new kind of pressure. Now everyone was watching. Competitors were copying. Investors were demanding more. Could NVIDIA keep this up? Or was this just one lucky hit? Jensen's answer was simple. We move faster. Always, he doubled down on the 6-month release cycle. Engineers were pushed to the limit. Some nights, people literally slept under their desks. It was exhausting. But every 6 months, NVIDIA released something better, faster, more powerful. And with each release, their legend grew. By the early 2000s, NVIDIA wasn't just a player anymore. It was the king of graphics. And Jensen? He wasn't the dishwasher kid from Denny's anymore. He was now the man holding the controller of an entire industry. But here's the twist. Jensen never saw GPUs as just for games. While the world thought NVIDIA was just making fun toys for gamers, Jensen was already whispering something bigger. One day, these chips will power artificial intelligence. Most people thought he was dreaming too far, but Jensen knew this was only the beginning. By the mid-2000s, NVIDIA was on top of the gaming world. The GeForce line was crushing competitors. Gamers loved them. Investors were happy. For most CEOs, this would have been enough. But Jensen Huang is not most CEOs. One day, in a meeting with his engineers, he said something strange. What if our GPUs are not just for games? What if they can teach machines to think? The room went quiet. Remember, this was long before AI was a buzzword. Back then, artificial intelligence was mostly science fiction, or at best, locked away in research labs with little progress. Nobody thought it was practical. But Jensen had noticed something others didn't. The kind of math that powers video games, rendering 3D worlds, calculating pixels and physics in parallel, was the same kind of math needed for artificial intelligence. Neural networks, the building blocks of AI, require massive amounts of parallel computation. CPUs weren't built for that. GPUs were. So Jensen made a bold move. Around 2006, NVIDIA launched CUDA, a programming language that let researchers use GPUs for more than graphics. Suddenly, scientists could run massive calculations, not just draw pretty pictures. Here's the problem. Almost nobody cared. At first, CUDA was a flop. Developers didn't want to learn it. Investors didn't see the point. Even some of NVIDIA's own employees thought Jensen was wasting time. But Jensen didn't back down. He kept saying, "This is the future. One day, the world will thank us." And then, years later, the world started to change. Around 2012, a small group of researchers used NVIDIA GPUs to train deep learning models for image recognition. The results? Stunning. Suddenly, computers could recognize cats, faces, even objects in photos better than ever before. That single breakthrough triggered an AI boom. And guess what? Almost all of it ran on NVIDIA GPUs. By the time companies like Google, Facebook, and Tesla jumped into AI, they all realized the same thing. If you want to do serious AI, you need NVIDIA. Jensen's crazy gamble had turned into the foundation of the AI revolution. But here's the twist. While the world was finally catching on, the demand for GPUs exploded so fast that NVIDIA struggled to keep up. Data centers wanted them. Universities wanted them. Even Bitcoin miners wanted them. Suddenly, the little chip maker from Silicon Valley wasn't just a gaming company anymore. It was powering the brains of the future. And Jensen? He wasn't done. He kept telling people, "This is just the beginning. I will transform every single industry." At first, many laughed. Now, no one is laughing. By the late 2000s, something wild was happening. NVIDIA chips weren't just inside gaming PCs anymore. They were inside Tesla's self-driving cars, Facebook's giant AI labs, and even Google's massive data centers. The same little pieces of silicon that once made your favorite games look realistic were now teaching machines how to see, drive, talk, and think. And yet, even with all this momentum, Jensen Huang kept pushing further. He walked into meetings with industries that had nothing to do with video games. Doctors, oil engineers, scientists mapping the human genome. He'd say, "Your work will run on GPUs." Most of them stared back, confused. Why would a chip built for video games help them cure diseases or search for oil? Jensen would smile, pull up a demo, and show them. Suddenly, they'd see a cancer scan analyzed in seconds. They'd see a simulation of an oil field running faster than any supercomputer. And slowly, one by one, industries began to believe. But here's the twist. Jensen wasn't just selling chips. He was selling a vision. He told the world that AI was not a tool. It was the new electricity. Just like electricity transformed every part of society a century ago, AI would do the same in our lifetime. And NVIDIA, they weren't just selling hardware. They were building the backbone of that revolution. Of course, the road wasn't smooth. In 2018, NVIDIA's stock crashed nearly 50% after the crypto boom collapsed. Remember when Bitcoin miners were buying every graphics card they could find? When that bubble burst, NVIDIA got hammered. Reporters said, "It's over." They flew too close to the sun, but Jensen stayed calm. At the next company meeting, he told his employees, "We've been through worse. We're going to come out stronger," and he was right. Because only a few years later, something else exploded: ChatGPT. OpenAI's chatbot went viral overnight, and guess what powered it? NVIDIA GPUs. In fact, almost every major AI model, from language to image to self-driving cars, runs on NVIDIA hardware. Suddenly, the world realized that Jensen Huang, the kid who once washed dishes at Denny's, was now running the company that everyone depended on to build the future. By 2023, NVIDIA's market value passed $1 trillion. Let that sink in. A company once known for video games became more valuable than giants like Meta, Tesla, and even most oil companies. And Jensen? He still showed up to work in his trademark black leather jacket, smiling like a rock star, telling people, "This is just the beginning." Because for him, it's never been about the money. It's always been about the same thing: betting on the future. So, what do we learn from Jensen Huang's journey? He wasn't born into power. He wasn't the smartest kid in the room. He wasn't even safe from failure. He washed dishes at Denny's. He started a company when everyone said it would crash. He poured everything into crazy ideas that no one believed in. And yet, that's exactly why he won. Jensen teaches us this: the future doesn't belong to the cautious. It belongs to the ones who dare to bet big, again and again, even when the world calls them foolish. When you use ChatGPT, when you see self-driving cars, when AI diagnoses diseases faster than doctors, remember, behind all of that, there's a company called NVIDIA and a man named Jensen Huang who never stopped betting on tomorrow. And maybe that's the lesson for us too. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. But if you believe in something, and you're willing to risk, to build, to keep going when no one else does, you might just change the world. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Daily English Story. Here, we bring you stories that inspire your life and help you improve your English at the same time. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story.